Hello and welcome to Love, Dating, and Relationships for Spiritual Women. I'm your host, Julie Grimm. I'm a spiritual guide in the Modern Mystery School, and I support people in their own journey towards greater intimacy in their life. I'm so excited to have with me today, joining from San Diego, Dawn Ressel. Dawn is also a teacher, guide, and healer within the Modern Mystery School, and she works with women who have gone through or are going through topics like what we will cover today around divorce. So excited to have you today, Dawn.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to dive into this topic.
Yeah, it's an important one and one which we have not yet touched in my show. Typically, we're talking about meeting a partner, forming that relationship, working through relationship issues. But today we're actually going to be talking about divorce. So the ending of a relationship. But what I love about the perspective that you bring is how divorce can actually benefit us in our lives. So some people listening might have been through a divorce. Maybe they're struggling in a relationship now. Maybe they have their parents were divorced. But for most of us, we have a negative connotation. We have a negative concept with this. I don't even know what to call it, with how relationships end in divorce. But you're sharing something totally different. So can you tell us a little bit more about your perspective on divorce and even a little bit more about your story?
Sure. Well, first of all, my perspective on divorce and just relationships ending in general is that's not that it's easy, but sometimes it's a necessary thing for both people, to grow and to find something that's more in alignment with what they need at that time in their life. And so that's my perspective coming in. When I met my ex-husband, I was in my early 20s. And I had a lot of mental health issues. I had very bad generalized anxiety disorder. So I was always in a state of, fear and confusion and upset. And I had a lot of phobias. Like, for instance, I couldn't even drive on the highway without having a panic attack when I was at my very worst. And that was pretty early, in my relationship with my ex-husband. I was in that state. And so, my ex-husband was a wonderful man, and he was very comforting for me. And he supported me in a lot of ways, but I would say it was more compensating for me, and so we had what I would consider a codependent relationship. He compensated for me in ways that I was really weak, and I compensated for him in some ways where he wasn't really living up to his potential either. And we stayed like that for quite a while until I started to really feel that I needed to break out of this box of mental illness and all these limitations that I put on myself. I started really seeking spiritually and really trying to figure out who I was, because I was at the verge of a nervous breakdown. And I was having an existential crisis. And I didn't know why I was so miserable. I really didn't. I had no idea what the root cause was. And the more I dug into that spiritual journey, the more I started to realize that I'd created this life that was not what I wanted. It wasn't bringing me joy. I hadn't really not a lot of passion around it. And unfortunately, in my relationship with my ex-husband, our passion for each other had completely dwindled. We were best friends, but we weren't romantic for a long time, a very long time, many years. And so I started to really look at that. I started to look at this life that I had built that I thought was what society said it would promise you happiness, right? Like, have the great job, have the beautiful house, have the husband. And I had all those things. And I thought, gosh, I've arrived. Why am I so miserable? And it was because those things just weren't in alignment with who I really was. I built my life on a foundation of what other people told me I should be doing. And that included who I should marry to some extent. Not that anyone told me I should marry him, but people told me I should be married, and so I married someone who was really comfortable and safe for me. And that worked great in the beginning, until I really started to realize that I needed way more in my life. I needed joy, I needed passion, I needed to really know who I was. And that wasn't happening within the confines of that relationship.
That's amazing. How was that waking up period? Like, was there a moment, was it a slow and gradual wake up call to your true self? How would you describe that? Because when you're speaking, I can imagine many people can relate to what you're saying, maybe not in every single point, but in general. And yet, a lot of people don't choose to continue to look into themselves and don't choose to make a change in their life because, as you said in the beginning, it might be very hard to leave a relationship like that.
It was very hard. And the thing about a spiritual journey, I think when you're doing it correctly, is it's going to bring a lot of light into your situation. So you can sit in a dark room and be like, oh, everything's fine. But then you start shining light and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a mess, And so it was a rude awakening, actually. It was quite startling, to be honest with you. My awakening was like harsh for myself and harsh for my ex-husband too. Because all of a sudden I looked around and saw that all these things that we had built together didn't serve me. And they were the cause of why I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and, I thought, oh, maybe if I just keep going to therapy or if I take another pill or, I was on medication at that time for my anxiety disorder. Well, maybe I just need a different pill or maybe I need another pill, and it's like, no, Dawn, you need to redo your whole foundation of your life because this is the foundation of your life is what's creating this great anxiety and putting you on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So it was a rude awakening. It was not easy. But once you have that much light on the situation, you have a choice. You could stay in that misery with all this light and look at the mess and say, yeah, I'm not going to do anything about it. Or you can say, I'm going to do something about this because I see where this is going and it's not good. So I chose the latter. I chose to do the hard thing and really evaluate whether or not I needed to stay in this, whether or not I could stay in this marriage for my own sanity.
Well, you're talking too, there's a piece, it seems to me, like of hope, of trust that there is something better, because I can imagine that there's almost, you're like, well, is this as good as it gets? What, maybe not if you're on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but honestly, even if you are, sometimes we still tell ourselves, well, this is so good. It's so perfect. I should be happy.
Yes.
I have all the things and I'm still not happy. What's wrong with me? Maybe I just need to do some gratitude practices.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was definitely, there was a long period of time where I said those things to myself and they didn't work, obviously, because I got to the edge of the cliff. I felt like I was backing slowly, inch by inch, every single day to the edge of the cliff. And I finally got to the edge of the cliff and looked down and was like, I can't anymore. And the other complicating factor, there were many complicating factors, to be honest, but my ex-husband was also dealing with his own mental illness issues. And so he wasn't very present in the relationship. And I didn't think that he was either capable of or had the desire to, or both, to make any changes. But I wanted to make big changes in our life. And when it became apparent that he wasn't on that same page, either because he wasn't capable of doing it or willing to do it, there was no other alternative. I couldn't continue suffering. I couldn't continue suffering. There was so much, I did not take any of this lightly though. There was so much burden on me. I felt maybe perceived burden to honor, to be loyal and to honor him and to stick it out, even though it was really difficult. But at the end of the day, I had to choose myself, and I'm a different person now. Like maybe the person who's sitting in front of you now could have coped with that situation better, but I was not equipped. I just wasn't equipped to handle that situation at that time. I had to do it the way I did it for my own sanity.
What I'm hearing so many messages or themes within your story. I mean, there's one about commitment. And so commitment is, for most of us, it's a valuable quality. Like, oh, I'm going to have commitment. I'm going to have loyalty. I'm going to have follow through. But there's nuance there that it's
Right.
not so subtle, actually, because you're on the verge
No.
of a nervous breakdown. So you think it's
Yeah.
actually pretty obvious, but
Yeah.
the nuance is that it's like, well, are you committed to yourself,
Exactly.
or are you
Exactly.
committed to a life of suffering and
Yeah.
pain? And
Yeah.
I also, when you're talking, it's just part of how this conversation came to be was about people's like reactions to divorce. And so when you're talking too, I mean, there was a lot of growth and strengthening for you that allowed you to be strong enough to move forward. But it also seems to me that like the cultural opinions of divorce almost kept you there longer.
Oh,
Because
they definitely did. Yeah,
yeah,
they did. They definitely did, for sure. 100%.
and so that's what's kind of revelatory about this story. And hopefully for people who are listening, that they could see that divorce isn't so terrible and actually can be life-giving
Mhm.
for themselves. And in a way, maybe they don't have to go as deep and as dark. They could leave earlier. And again, like you said, not willy-nilly, not without thought, not without reflection,
Mhm.
but that we hold ourselves into things that aren't good for us.
Yeah. 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 And I really do believe I did everything I could on my end, but it just wasn't a fit anymore. When you're in a codependent relationship, it relies on neither person changing, neither person growing. And if one of those people starts to become independent, just to heal, to assert their independence, suddenly the whole structure breaks down. And that's where I was. I didn't need these crutches anymore, and I wasn't really getting anything that I really did need at that time, from the relationship. So that's what sent me into this existential crisis. I didn't see a way that I could grow, and I didn't see a way that I could really get to know myself in the terms that I wanted to, without, unfortunately, ending that relationship. And so maybe we should talk about like what's happened since then, because so much has changed. And it was really a very necessary thing for me to do, to end that relationship. And like I said, I did not take it lightly at all. And I did get a lot of criticism, but you know what? It was my life at stake. I really do believe that.
Well, absolutely. And the criticism, not to dwell, because I want to hear about the breakthrough too, but the criticism, it's sort of like a rewiring for us
Mhm.
culturally, because we're all bringing sort of baggage. Oh, my parents were divorced. It was hard. It was this, or, we're watching that happen to other people, or maybe we have our own experience with it. But then we're projecting that experience onto either a future for ourselves or onto other people that can
Mhm.
actually be harmful. And
Yeah.
that's something that we teach in the modern mystery schools, that opinion is the second greatest evil. And you're like,
Mhm.
well, opinion, how can it be so bad? But here's where it gets so bad, because it tells us this thing that's going to liberate me is something I can't do because it's bad or good, or
Yeah.
this way of being that is actually in alignment with my soul isn't a
Yeah.
way that I can live because
Yeah.
I've been told
Yeah.
that it's not.
Totally. I actually needed permission from someone else to do it. So I was in therapy for many years. And finally, one day, my therapist said to me, Dawn, you describe your marriage like a prison. And I was like, whoa. And then I had to ask myself, if I'm in prison, who's the warden? Well, I'm the warden, you know? And I won't go too much deeper into all of that, but that was a rude awakening, to realize I'm keeping myself captive. And gosh, if I'm using the same words that someone would describe to be in prison, clearly something is wrong, and my soul is crying out for freedom, and I needed it in order to grow. So since then, there was a very hard couple of years, that transition period of working through the forgiveness and rebuilding my relationship with my ex-husband. And we became friends again. And so that was great. You know, he was able to forgive me, and I was able to forgive myself and forgive him, you know. So we got through that. And then I really started working on myself. That's really when I found the Modern Mystery School, was very shortly after my divorce was finalized. And that's when I got my life activation. And then I started to reawaken to the possibility of bringing more people into my life, because at that point, like our marriage had been so all consuming. I didn't have any friends. So once I got my life activation, I was like, I need friends, you know? And so I started bringing friends. I started traveling more. I started going on adventures. And then once I received Empower Thyself and initiation, my anxiety disorder was completely gone. Like, it healed overnight, literally. That's why I'm a guide, to be honest with you. That's the reason I'm a guide, because I know what it did for me, and it was miraculous. So once I had friends in my life and I didn't have anxiety disorder, then I felt like I took off like a rocket ship, because all these things that were holding me back were no longer in my mind, you know, were no longer a factor. And so I was really able to focus on, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And very quickly, after Empower Thyself, only a couple months after, I realized I'm here to be a healer. And I've been in the technology industry my whole career. So being a energy healer, spiritual healer was nowhere in my sphere of awareness, you know, for decades. And then all of a sudden I did Empower Thyself, and I'm like, I'm a healer.
Isn't it amazing? I have a
Yeah.
similar story where I don't know if it was it must have been Empower Thyself. Even the life activation started to wake it up inside of me. And I was like, I need to quit my job right away and be a healer.
Yeah, see, and I quit my job too. I sold my house. I mean, I made so many changes in my foundation of my life. And now everything is on my terms, because everything has been rebuilt from scratch, and it's been built with intention, and it's been built with the understanding, much better understanding of who I am and what my purpose is. And so my life is completely different now. You know, I'm very intentional about who's in my life, what's in my life, what I do, you know, how I spend my time. And before I was totally on, that's my, that's Ivy.
We have a special guest.
Yeah. And before I was totally on autopilot, you know, I was just living on what I had always done. And now I have the freedom to make intentional choices. I have the awareness to make intentional choices. And I just, like I said, you know, I wasn't the same person back then. I wasn't strong enough or whatever I needed to be in order to do that within that marriage. But I just couldn't have done it within the confines of that marriage. It had to happen this way. And it had to happen that way so that I could go from honestly serving one person, which was my ex-husband, to serving many people. That was my bigger purpose. And I hope that doesn't sound callous to some, but that is the truth. You know, I really had this mission of service that was buried so deep in my soul that I didn't even know it existed. And that needed to be uncovered. And I had to dig and dig and dig and dig all the layers of who I really was to get to it. And then once I found it, I was like, this is why, you know, I needed to be on this journey of self-discovery. And what I've learned is that, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Julie, is that a lot of times in the Modern Mystery School, as a healer or a guide, the kinds of clients that are naturally attracted to you often have a similar story. And so I found so many women are attracted to me who have been through divorce, and it's been liberating for them too. You know, I have a good number of clients who have a very similar story to me. So I was really meant to go through this journey in order to be able to help people like that.
Yeah. And put your life experience into use in service, which is wisdom. It's so interesting what you're saying too, though, you know, about this rebuilding, because we talk a lot in the mystery school, specifically in Kabbalah, about your foundation. And until we're connected to spirit, I know for myself, our foundation is built on the physical world. It's built on attachments to other people, to our jobs, to basically false identities. Any foundation that's not built in spirit is actually not a good foundation to build on. And it's really humbling when that light comes in to begin to see and become aware of where we have built on a foundation that's really not our truth and our true selves.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened for me. And thankfully, I had the tools of the lineage to support me in that, because it would have been a lot slower had I not. The journey to self and the journey to joy would have been a lot slower. I think I would have gotten there, but without that key part of knowing my purpose, that would have been a while to get that to some sense of joy or some sense of purpose in my life. So that was key. That was key for me, to break out of that box.
Yeah, and the message of joy, like you said, it struck me when you were talking about, serving one versus serving many. Each of us has a unique purpose. So maybe for some people, their purpose is to serve one,
Mhm.
but they would have joy in that. They
Yeah.
wouldn't have a
Yes.
mental breakdown.
Right.
They wouldn't be having anxious
Yes.
panic attacks every
Right.
day.
Exactly.
And even now, serving as a guide, doing healing work, I find myself sometimes falling into patterns where I've forgotten the joy of the work, or I've started to, like you were saying, falling into, this is how it's done, this is how other people want it to be done. But our true joy comes from our expression of self, which is our unique expression. So each of us is going to serve, but in our unique way. And it's not going to look the same for any of us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's really goes back to know thyself, right? And when you're in a relationship where you've given up who you really are, and that's me, that's totally on me. I allowed myself to give up who I really was and lose myself. But when you get to that point in a relationship, how can you really serve? Because you don't know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you can't know your purpose. And if you don't know your purpose, you can't serve. So that's what I allowed to happen to myself, was to just totally lose myself and therefore lose my purpose. And my soul was just screaming out, Dawn, you have this important purpose, and you're totally blind to it. You're just on autopilot. And the foundation that you have isn't going to support that mission. And it is unfortunate that people look at divorce and any ending of a relationship as an automatic failure, because you can't have a beginning without an ending. And so my hope for myself is that I find a relationship that lives up to what it is that I really want now that I know myself and I know what I really want and I know what I truly deserve. It's taken many, many years for me to get to this place where I feel like I'm really solid on that. But yeah, that's my hope. And my hope is to find a partner that I can co-create with, who wants to co-create in the light and has a similar mission. And I really feel, and I think I heard you talking about this topic in one of your other episodes, that that's part of my mission, is to find my divine union partner, because we're supposed to co-create some stuff. And now that I really know myself and I know my mission and I really am connected to what my purpose is, I know there's a puzzle piece I still have to get into place in order to fulfill some of those pieces of my mission that requires a partner, that requires that divine masculine to come in and co-create with me. So, I'm optimistic and excited about that potential future. But for right now, of course, I'm doing everything I can to create the life that I want and to serve others to the greatest of my capacity.
Well, and also, if you hadn't gotten that divorce, you would still be trying to make it work with somebody else. You would be trying to get him to flow in a way that he just isn't going to flow, or to show up in a way that he maybe isn't willing to show up to. So it's almost like, if you don't allow that old relationship to die, this is kind of what you were saying, there isn't that opportunity for the new to be born into existence.
Right, exactly. And I found, after I got divorced, I started repeating some of the same patterns, in the first few people that I started relationships with. But then the cool thing was, I started seeing my reflection much more clearly. And I started being like, wait a minute, no, I'm repeating a pattern that I just tried to get out of. And so every person that I've dated has been a learning experience for me to know myself better, and that reflection that you only get in relationships is so powerful. I really don't think you get a full 360 view of yourself outside of a relationship, because there's certain aspects of yourself that are only really shown through the reflection of a romantic partner. So that's been a fun journey too, is discovering myself in the reflection of others that were very different from, my ex-husband, but maybe I'm showing up in some ways the same, that was not healthy, and that's really helped me in my healing journey too.
And would you say that it's become easier for you to let go of something, to know when it's time to move on from that experience, or is it
I am
still?
like, things are so in the rear view mirror so fast for me now when I see that it's not serving myself or the other person or both, because I'm so dedicated to my own growth, and I love myself so much more. I know myself so much more. It's so much easier to let go. I'm not saying that I haven't had any heartbreak or disappointment. Of course I have, but gosh, I'm so much more resilient now. Yeah. And so much more clear about what it is that I'm actually looking for and where the bar is. When I first started dating after, I got divorced, I didn't date for a couple of years, but, after that period, then I started seeing like, okay, no, the bar's here, maybe the bar's here. Oh, no, the bar's here. No. And gradually I started raising the bar for myself, but also for my potential partner, because I started seeing where I was showing up in ways that I needed to grow out of and to heal, So yeah. And now that I know, like, the bar is up here, and if it's down here, and I figure that out like pretty quickly, I'm like, okay, that was fun, but bye. Yeah.
Time to move on. Yeah, and
Yeah,
like you said, it is actually, if it's not serving you, this is my opinion, it's not serving the other person either. So
totally.
it's a benefit for both of you, although that doesn't mean that there won't be heartbreak or there won't be hurt feelings,
Yeah.
but ultimately
Yeah.
it's for the higher good to
Yeah.
not be
I
with
really,
a good fit.
totally. Yeah. I mean, I really feel like if people didn't settle in their relationships, that we'd probably all find someone that is really great for us, that is that great match, that potential divine union partner. But there's so many people in relationships settling while that other person might be out there, waiting for them or looking for, and that makes me sad when I think about that. So then I think, well, I owe it to myself and I owe it to this other person, as soon as I figure out it's not going to work long term, to really just do a compassionate thing, which, maybe people don't always think ending a relationship is compassionate, but ultimately it is the most compassionate thing for both parties, to end a relationship when it's clear it's just not going to work out. And of course, I'm a big advocate of trying to work stuff out to the degree that is possible. I'm not saying you just throw out relationships willy-nilly. I would never say that, but like I said, I tried for many years to find solutions, within my marriage, that it just wasn't going to work. And I feel like when you get to that point where there's no joy, there's no passion, and there's no potential solution, what else can you do, except compassionately end the relationship for both of you?
Yeah, and you use this term, your therapist did it for you, and I know you've actually said it to me one time too. Give yourself permission. Like, give yourself permission to let them go. Give yourself
Yeah.
permission to move on. Give yourself permission to end it. Because settling in relationships, settling in all areas of our life, like anywhere in your life that you find yourself with something that you don't actually enjoy or like, or doesn't bring you joy, but we've just compromised ourselves so much that we're almost not even aware that we've settled, except for
Yeah.
our soul screaming at us, please stop it.
Yeah. I was just letting the hammer hit my toe over and over and over again, basically. And finally, my toe was like, hello, I'm a part of your body. Stop hurting me. And that was my soul, basically. My soul was like, stop hurting me. Stop hurting me. So I had to finally listen to it.
Yeah. Well, it's been so good talking. I wonder if you, for anyone listening, let's say that they're having relationship issues. Maybe they've, through this conversation, started to identify that they have been settling. There have been lots of signs. They're in that state. They're not sure which one's giving up on the relationship or giving up on their dreams for the future life. What kind of advice or just insights, what could, any messages that come to those people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first and foremost thing is to honor yourself, to know yourself, get to know yourself better, um, and to then honor that person that you are, and really take a look at the other person, and have conversations with the other person about whether or not they feel like there's something to be done, and if so, what. And definitely leave space for healing and negotiation and trying to reconcile. But if it becomes clear that it is a situation where you're just settling and it's just never going to get better, do the compassionate thing for yourself and the other person, and set yourselves free. Because my ex-husband never would have chosen to end that relationship, but in the end, I only saw it very recently that I think it was the right thing for him too, even though he would have never chosen it. So you don't let what you think the other person, how they might respond or what they would choose, override your own will and your own sense of purpose and your own responsibility to yourself. Because if that's not the right relationship, there's something better out there for you. And maybe it is just a period of years of getting to know yourself, which I've been in, for like 6 years, a long period of getting to know myself and getting to know my purpose. Maybe that's what's on the other side of this for you. Maybe it's not another relationship immediately, but whatever it is on the other side, you owe it to yourself to honor that and figure that out and allow yourself to experience it.
Love it. Absolutely. When you're talking to, just one more thing, I've, part of me having this video series is because I've struggled so much in relationships. And I've always found that that thing that I'm seeking, that I want from that other person, that causes me to settle, when I'm able to provide it for myself, or when I meet myself in that deep space, whatever it is, I come to know myself, it's actually so much more rewarding than trying to get it from somebody who is a bad fit. So
Yes.
it's hard sometimes to imagine that, because we're so used to trying to seek it out from somebody else and compromising our needs to get it met through somebody who's not actually able to fully. And yet when we really do that kind of hard and deep work, wow, it's so much more rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be a whole person meeting another whole person, you and so whatever it is that you need to do to make yourself the whole person, you're going to be in a much better position to attract someone else who is a whole person themselves. And then two whole people can create way more than two half people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Lots more joy, lots more
Yeah,
passion.
totally. And then,
Yes.
you're not trying to compensate for each other. You're figuring out how can we weave together our unique strengths and abilities and complement each other and co-create and do that joyfully with passion and bring that to the world and be an example for the world. Needs examples right now of these types of relationships. I know we know a few people in common who have these types of relationships, and it's so inspiring, and the world needs those examples right now. I really feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. So beautiful. Well, if you're in San Diego, or if you feel called to, we'll have Dawn's information below this video. You can reach out, get that Empower Thyself, heal your lifelong anxiety. What an amazing testimony, Dawn. I'd never heard that before.
It's true.
So powerful, and many
Yeah.
other things. So great to have you, and thanks for sharing your story today.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
All right. Bye, everybody.